I'm excited to welcome Daphne Bryant to the Association 100 today. Daphne is with the American Council of Engineering Companies Research Institute. Thank you so much for joining me today, Daphne.
Thanks, Megan. I'm excited to be here with you.
Great. So let's get started. Research is often touted as a member benefit, but talk to me about the tangible ways a robust research program can benefit members.
Sure. I think there are several ways, actually. Members need data. They need benchmarking. They need resources to grow their businesses, to manage their teams, to compete in today's crazy environment, right? And I think most members don't have the financial or the staff resources to do that type of work themselves. So I think, it's really the association or the foundation's role to provide those valuable resources for the members. In addition to that, I would say research often can be used by your organization's advocacy teams and certainly the communications teams, right? I know you know that firsthand,
Absolutely.
Megan. So if your organization has state or regional chapters, there's also research that's valuable for them to use at the state level for advocacy to provide member value, especially if you can take research that you're doing nationally or globally and break it down into those regional segments. And it's also a great source of non-dues revenue, quite honestly. So while there's certainly an expense to conducting research, especially credible research, it's also an opportunity for sponsorship and the creation of then derivative work that not only creates additional educational resources, but also revenue for the organization as well.
That's great. Now, at multiple associations now, you have driven market impact studies that show your members' industry impact on the overall economy. How valuable is a tool like that for associations?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. These types of studies really lend themselves well for the work that an association or its foundation or institute do. I mentioned earlier, not only does it bring direct value to your members, but indirect value through your advocacy and communications teams. And I think associations need to be able to not just say that their industry and that their members are important, but be able to prove it, right? And so we've typically looked at this as a three-pronged approach for these types of studies. The first is to identify and measure the overall size, scope, and growth of the industry. How many people do we employ? How many businesses are we? What are our annual revenues? And then the second part is you want to measure your direct economic contribution as it relates to GDP, to tax revenues, as well as your indirect and induced impact on these areas. So your industry is probably not just contributing through the direct work you do, but the upstream and downstream businesses and the industries you buy from and the industries you support. When you add all that together, it can be a very significant number and one that you're going to want to tout and share with all of your stakeholders. And then finally, the third piece is to build a statistical model to forecast the future and future financial performance for your sector. Now, this type of outlook model allows you to not only forecast for the future performance, but it also allows you to evaluate possible scenarios that could happen, right? Whether those are policy changes that impact your industry, geopolitical events, environmental forces, all of those things can then be pinged back against that model that you have to look at what impact something like that would have on your industry and its future. We typically look at about a 5-year forecast in the work that I've done. This data is hugely valuable for us as a national organization, for our advocacy team as they're talking to legislators and regulators on the Hill. But it's also valuable if you can break it down, as I mentioned, at the state level or the regional level, and maybe you're a global organization and you need to break down into country level to be able to use that. Our state chapters take it to their state houses when they're battling regulations and legislation and needing to prove the value of engineering to their state coffers. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities there. And of course, any communications team loves this type of research, right? It provides tons of great data that can be used for infographics, for press releases, for sound bites. And I know, Megan, you've had opportunity to take advantage of those types of things from a communication standpoint as well.
Yes. I mean, that is all such great information. Now, as you know, every association doesn't have funding for this. They struggle to get funding for research. What are some recommendations you have for those associations?
Yeah, I mentioned research can be a great source of non-dues revenue. I've seen it generate millions of dollars annually for association foundations, especially if you do it through a 501c3 entity, right? So if you have an association that has a foundation or an institute that's set up as a C3 operation, you then have that tax deductible donation that goes as the sponsorship of the research. So I think the first thing to do is to get input from your stakeholders on the types of research that's needed for your industry. You don't want to just do everything, and you don't want to do things that other groups might already be doing or have done. So I recommend, getting together with your boards, your committees, your government affairs teams, your communications folks, right? What are your communications teams getting asked by the media? What kinds of questions that you're not able to answer right now? Those are great idea starters for research. Most donors want to be seen as thought leaders. And so they'll come to you and say, we want a sponsorship around thought leadership, but they don't really know what that means between you and me. So you have to kind of help them. And so it's great to have this list of ideas that you have accumulated from all your stakeholders to be able to say, how about something like this? So the conversation has to be a bit strategic and talk to the topics that are important to them and align with their businesses. I think, and then, you want to offer up those ideas, and the ideas should provide a halo effect for that sponsor. It should not be a commercial for that sponsor, right? And so they should be able to be seen as a thought leader because they're tied to this research, but they should not be driving the research or its outcomes. So I think you have to also be careful in this when you're doing sponsorship for research, that you don't that they're clear on what their role is, right? Their role is to advise and to provide some input, but certainly not editorial rights. And so you've got to draw some divisions there. And then I think you want to create a robust set of donor benefits around the research program, the sponsorship program. So a couple of things I'll just mention that we've used successfully in the past. Certainly you want to brand that donor if they choose to be. Some want to remain anonymous, and that's fine. But most of them will want to be branded on the material. So whether it's the final report, the executive summaries, the promotional materials you use, that they sponsored this research. The great thing is, because it's done by your outside entity, it's seen as credible, right? It's not them talking to themselves. You want to build a communications plan around that. So the press releases, your association publications, and different channels that you use to communicate with your constituents. Social media, usually there's a lot of great, kind of infographic stuff that can be created that's helpful. And then you want to include an opportunity for them to co-present the research, whether that is at an in-person event that you're hosting, maybe it's at their client or user conference, webinars, whatever those opportunities are to present and co-present with your researcher or other executives from your team. That's a great opportunity for them to, again, be elevated to that thought leadership position. We also will typically offer them the raw data set. Some of them have the ability internally to do further analysis or analyze it in conjunction with some data that they might have to provide additional insights for them. So that's an added value and benefit for the sponsor. And then allow them to use the results to create additional derivative products, right? They might want to create a brochure about it and use some of the work, just making sure that they cite where the research comes from. So all of those are different ways that you can continue to add value to the sponsorship. We've also had situations where we've done proprietary research for the sponsor, right? So it may be that they want to know about a market that they're looking to get into, a new product they're thinking of releasing, and your membership allows them to gain those insights. But remember that your membership is your number one asset. So when it comes to research, never let anyone have access to your members without going through you in a sponsorship type of opportunity. We guard our membership, under lock and key. We don't sell our lists. We think that is, the most valuable asset we have. And so we want to protect that. And then I think the final thing is just make sure that you have a really reliable and experienced research team. And whether that's an in-house team, if you're fortunate enough to have that, if not, that you're working with really credible, groups, whether they be academic institutions, professors, or researchers that you're outsourcing. There are a lot out there that will, throw a survey monkey together for you and do some research, and that's not what you're looking for. Anyway, that would be my final recommendation.
These are such amazing insights, as always. So this has been great. Thank you, Daphne. I appreciate you joining. And thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in.
Thanks, Megan. I enjoyed it. Have a great day.